everyone, Karen the Warped Spinster here. Thank you for spending time with me today. I don't say that lightly. That isn't just part of a script or something. I really do. Thank you for joining me. I enjoy having you here. Today I'm going to be doing another funky wonky wild log cabin adaptation. And I have my crumbs left over from trimming the 2.5-inch square adaptations of the log cabin, and then I have a tin of crumbs that I've been gathering the last, I don't know, month or so maybe. Then I also have, as I'm sure you would have guessed, some white scraps and strips, and I also have a couple of black and white stripes here. They're two different sizes, and ordinarily I would think this one would be too large, but it depends on the size of block that I'm going to do. And I have an idea just came to me this morning while I was doing this, and I had another idea for how I might go forward with some future videos. So it has been an idea heavy day, and I'm never sorry about that. This time I'm going to be doing a Courthouse Steps instead of, well, the first one we did was to just wind around all four sides, sort of, I want to say equal in terms of pattern, etc. The next one we did was for opposite corners, but this one is going to be Courthouse Steps, which means that you build on opposite sides first and then do the adjacent sides, opposite adjacent sides. Anyway, if you don't know, if you couldn't figure out what I was talking about, I'll show you here in a minute. In traditional courthouse steps, as with other log cabins, you generally start with a small square in the center and move out from there with whichever pattern you're using. But I actually want to do a long and sort of narrow start to it. So I'm going to do this just sort of roughly in half. And then, so what I plan to do here in my head, pardon my voice today, it's a fun with sinus day for me. So I may sound a little craggy. I'm going to do the stripes, I guess the more neutral part of it I'm going to do on these short ends, and then the crumb piecing strips I'm going to be doing on the long ends. Because I think I'm going to be doing stripes on these ends, and I want them to go vertically to mimic this long look here. I want to put these stripes, I think, alternating here, but then I also, I think, want to somehow have stripes in here. So as if this is moving out here, but it actually kind of starts in the center. I'm going to give it a try. We'll see how it looks. And I'm wondering if I could start out with these really wider stripes in here and then have those move out. So I'm going to give that a try. It may look awful. Who knows? And then I'm probably going to be doing narrow strips in between the crumb strips for the reasons that I've done it before, to sort of break up that chaos. Beloved chaos, don't get me wrong, I love it, but the eye needs some rest in between, and so that it doesn't all sort of melt into each other. So let's start out though with doing some crumb piecing here. Pardon my reach. Pull out some of these crumbs, and they aren't all from my 2.5-inch strip, 4A's, but 2.5-inch square, I mean 4A's. But let me find some smallish pieces here. That's left over from, I don't know, something I did earlier. And here's some more. And I'm looking for smaller pieces. I have some pieces in here that I could use just crazy quilting in general, but I'm not showing me leafing through this because frankly, it could make you a little seasick as I'm plowing through here. So we'll see how it goes. I'll want maybe a few kind of larger pieces, but for the most part, I want to stay fairly small, although honestly, it would probably make the video longer to have me putting smaller pieces together because that means more pieces. Now, there are a couple of ways I could go about piecing this. I'm going to end up wanting long, pretty narrow strips, which is not how I usually do crumb piecing. It's usually in, squares moving out. So I could have a foundation for it, so I could use paper, like cut a strip of paper, whatever sort of width and configuration that I want, and then piece on top of that. So sort of a foundation piecing thing. I could piece a wide strip or squares or whatever and then cut them into strips. Or I could just sort of wing it with strips. I pulled that out and I thought, do I want to use that in here? Is that going to help tie it in with these stripes, or is it going to make it goofy? I don't know. What I think I'm going to do is just piece in roughly a strip, maybe. Or maybe I'll do more of a square kind of thing, and to see how you can do that, or how I do it anyway, you can refer to a video I did a while back on crumb quilting, and I'll link that down in the description. So I may just go about kind of piecing a squarish sort of thing, because I think there will be less waste. If I do sort of vaguely strips, then I'm going to be chopping a lot off the edges, or I guess some off the edges, not a lot. Whereas if I do a squarish or rectangle configuration, then there won't be waste as I'm cutting several strips across it. So I'm going to start out with that. And because I'm starting out with a long strip here, that means I'm going to need to have pretty long strips. I can make these, the ones that are going to be here, narrower than what I'm making these, so that the strips don't get wildly larger as I move along. Not sure any of that is making sense to anyone, but my sort of foggy brain this morning. So I'm going to do a rectangular shaped piece with just some crumb piecing here. Thinking about whether or not I want to put some white crumbs in there. I might, to kind of balance it out a little bit. Tie it in with the narrow strips that are going to go in between. All right, I'm going to go off and do this. See if that time will give me a little clearing of the fog here. And then I'll be back with something to show you. Popping back on for a minute for a couple of things. First of all, just as I'm going along, because of what I started with here, which was this piece, I'm ending up with sort of a long, wide piece going on. And so in this case, instead of doing squares, I've started to piece sections, but not square. They're going to sort of be stripes almost. going down so that it may be a little more obvious than I generally would like that there are these horizontal lines working through it, but when it gets cut into strips, that's going to be minimized. So I'm not as worried about it as I would be if I were doing squares. In that case, I would want to break up those lines. And in fact, I could even do that here, slice that and move it around. But because I'm going to be cutting it into narrow strips, that isn't going to be a problem. Just to let you know what I'm doing here as I go. And secondly, I have a request. It's actually kind of a desperate plea, especially for those of you who are kind enough to be shouting out to me that I have missed something or something doesn't look right, or you have suggestions for how you might do it. I have had a very bad earworm for several days, and the song is not a happy song for me. And it's not a sad song, it's just I don't want this song in my head. And so I'm looking for you to shout out suggestions for me on a song that I might use to replace it. Something happy, upbeat, not hard rock Metallica kind of stuff, just an upbeat kind of happy ditty that I can have in my ear instead of this song. So I will be back after I have pieced a longer strip. I have a little ways to go yet. Another note as I'm going along with the decisions I'm making and why I'm making them, which does not mean you need to make the same decisions, but just my line of thinking here. I wanted to introduce another strip of this to balance out what's going on up here, and I wanted a little bit of white to lighten things up a little bit. So these are coming across as quite vertical and parallel lines, and I don't want that to go on for very long, but I was very limited in, this was a very narrow strip, so, and I wanted to keep as much of that as I could, so I didn't want to say, let me find a better piece than that, didn't want to cut across like this to break up that line, because then that means I'm losing some of that piece. So I'm all right with that, because now on these pieces I can start to cut them differently because I have more real estate here to work with. I think this is enough to be going on with, and I've got strips long enough to go on either side of here, and in the next round, if I need something longer than what I've cut from here, then I can just add pieces on. So this is enough of a starting base for me to get going. Now, when I pointed out earlier that I didn't want to lose this, see that little tiny bit there? I have a little teeny tiny piece there. I didn't want to lose this. If I happen to cut this right here, then I am going to lose that completely. So I want that to be centered in any cut that I make. So I'm actually going to start from that point to cut a couple of slices here. And I have a choice of, do I want them to be parallel, an equal width, consistent width all the way across, which would balance out this going on with the scraps, or I can do it wonkily, as I have been doing. And I think I'm going to start off with it wonky, and then I can always cut it straight if I decide that was a bad decision. All right, so making sure that, so this is probably going to be the wider part down here and then narrower at the top. And I see up here, I probably will lose a bit of that, but them's the breaks. All right, there's another strip in there somewhere. And then I want this, but with enough seam allowance that I'm not completely losing out on that. And make another cut. Now I can make these, of course, as wide or as narrow as I want. The ones I've been doing previously have been possibly a little narrower than that, but I don't care about that at the moment. I'm starting a new block and just trying something out here. So let's trim this one and do it. This one isn't going to be too wonky. They don't have to all be wonky. And I have a couple pieces in here that can go back into the crumb bin. That's the lovely thing about Crumbs and crazy quilting. You can just keep creating new ones, huh? All right, now I have cut this piece off a bit there, and I'm probably going to lose that in the seam, or mostly lose it. And as I said, them's the breaks. I probably don't want these right across from each other, so I may even set that aside and do another piece over here. Cut that one in a wonky fashion. And probably turn that. And as always, there are some pieces here that I'm going to lose in the seam, and okay. It's just the way it is. Now, with these two pieces that I have left, this one will be fine on its own. This one, need to trim there, is going to be probably too narrow up here. So I will, in all honesty, probably take that piece off, and then I can piece something on the side here in order to make this wide enough to use again. And if it needs to be longer on the next round, depending on how wide these pieces are, then I'm okay with that. So this first piece that I did is really just a start, and I can build it from there. I probably even made it taller or longer than I needed to, but we live and learn. And it's just part of a personal workflow, actually, so you may find that what I did doesn't work for you at all. This one, I'm wondering if I want to trim it even a little more, because I've got so many tiny bits that are going to make for bulky seams. I could trim that back even a little bit more without hurting the quilt or my feelings very much. Isn't that a pretty little strip? And then that piece will probably come off. So now my seams there won't be quite so bulky as I'm pressing them and quilting through them. There we go. Now, I'm back to my question of what I'm going to do in the center. And I think I'm going to test a couple of things out. So I want to cut a couple strips of the stripes here, and I'll be back after I do that, because I also want to clean up this mess of a board. It occurs to me as I'm cutting these stripes, I love stripes. I love them when I'm doing more traditional quilting for like inner borders and bindings especially, and in modern quilts, they just have that, I don't know, they add, it's both whimsy and kind of elegance to it, depending on how you arrange them. But anyway, so this narrower stripe, occurs to me I should tell you who they are by. This is one of Kimberbell's for Maywood Studio, and I don't know that I've got a selvage that tells me the name of the particular stripe, but it is from Kimberbell. That should hopefully get you to it. And this larger stripe is a Michael Miller Fabrics, and it's called Clown Stripe. Pattern number CX-3584. All right, I've got some strips here. I already had some strips cut of that one. And I want to do some auditioning here because I don't want to do all of this crumb work and then find out that what I did with the stripes really looks awful and I don't like it. So it's sort of improv, but not really improv. Now, what I'm going, I want them to go this direction though, I know. So let me cut off a little bit here. I do have quite a bit of this to play with. So if I put this, they don't even need to be straight though, do they? I was going to do them straight, but heck, they don't have to be straight. It just depends on how wild I want to get with this piece. I'm feeling the pandemic malaise has really hit me hardcore this week. I'm an introvert and I've worked at home for years. After many years of having to work with people and groups of people, and it's not that I don't like it, but it's very wearing for me. So working at home has been fine, and it hasn't been that much different in the pandemic. I've been very lucky that way. But it has somehow hit me finally after all this time. And so very wild and cheerful and whimsical is going to work for me today, I think. I hope it doesn't blow anybody's eyeballs out as I'm doing it. That may be a little much. And that may be a little much even for me. Maybe one wonky one in the center. It's kind of a little hard to tell until all right, let me cut one of these narrower. I like the idea of the contrast of the wide stripes and the narrower ones. I don't know if I like it in reality. We shall see. All right, we can further cut those and see what happens. And am I going to have alternating white, narrow white rounds with those too? That's really a lot, isn't it? That is a lot going on. If I take out one of these, of course, this is the problem with doing auditioning, is there's a lot of moving around. Maybe that can't be crooked. And always remembering that that's not going to be a horribly wide piece there. Maybe a little wider than that. Don't know. I think if I don't have this in here, then that's too much white, but I want a long strip here, and I don't want it to compete with this. I wonder what would happen if I did the opposite and started with narrower strips here and then wider strips out there. Maybe I don't want both sizes. Maybe I just want this one. No, that does not appear right to me at all. What if I do that? Now, any one of these that I am not choosing may strike you as the perfect thing for what you would do. That's the beauty of all of this. That probably looks better, doesn't it? Sorry for my tapping finger, that probably sounded horrible. I think I'm going to go for this. My question now is, do I want that to be crooked? Do I maybe want a couple of those like this and make them narrow, not necessarily the same width, in the middle? I can hear you shouting out things to me, but it's not clear to me what they are. I have to put up a little personal satellite or something. Have some repeaters across the globe. I think if those are narrow, that would be all right. And I think I'm happier with these wider stripes toward the outside. It's looking kind of like a film strip to me now. All right, so I'm going to try this. Make these narrower but piece them in here at a couple different angles. Then sew those on. I think I want a narrow white strip here. I don't think I do yet up here. I could always start with this instead of, no, I think I want that to cross those. All right, and I've already got white here. So I think I will piece these in, and then I will piece these two in. And since I am doing the Courthouse Steps, I can actually sew these two strips together and then sew it there. I can do it either way. I am going off to do that, and I will be back. Back again with another note. Typically when I am going to be folding toward a lighter fabric than rather than the darker side in this case, unless I'm doing precision piecing. Now when I'm doing this improv or the crazy quilting, this works fine. If I'm doing precision piecing where all the pieces have to fit together, this will not work. But for this, it will. And as I'm sewing it, I am leaving a little bit of a lip of the white there, rather than going back and trimming it later. So that as it goes toward the white, I don't have that shadowing from having the darker fabric overlapping the white at the edges there. And because there are so many seams going on here, it would be much more difficult to press that toward those seams. So I want to press it toward the light in this case. So I'm compensating a little bit in the seam. As I said, that won't work if you're doing precision piecing, because those seams, if you've cut them that way, they have to have that width on both sides of the seam. I have some crumbs that I have cut off the ends here that I can add back into my crumb bin. And now I'm at the point where I have to decide, am I going to have these be perfectly horizontal in relation to this, which isn't, frankly, all that perfectly vertical, or do I want to do a little wonky? And I think, or a lot wonky, and I don't think I want to do a lot wonky. I think there's so much else going on that would just be a distraction, but a little bit on a slant is okay. The stripes will be going a little kind of funky direction, but I think I'm okay with that. And now I have to decide how wide I want those wide stripes to be there. Definitely too narrow. See when my eye starts to rebel. I'm thinking about there as a finished width, which is what? I'm no good at estimating distances, just so you know. That's about 5/8. What would 3/4 look like? There's not enough difference between that and 3/4 probably to make a difference, but yes, so I'm gonna go with about 3/4 of an inch finished, which, well, let me think about that. Let me put a couple more white strips down here and put on another set of scrap strips. Let's see how it's going to be. Wouldn't necessarily be that strip there, of course, but just for the visual weight of it. That might be a little too wide once I start adding all this other foo-fa-ra going on. Yes, I think I want a little narrower rather than wide. So what's that about? Whoops, 3/8 of an inch-ish. 1/2 inch-ish finished. All right, so I'll want those stripes to be inch wide. And I don't think I want to put any kind of curve or extra wonkiness on it. Now in the next round, I might, or might not, turn these a little bit the other way. I'm not there yet. I've made this decision, I'm going with it. So about 1/2 inch wide. And I think again, I'm going to sew the next, I'm going to sew the white strip on there. Do I want to do that? No. I'm thinking about at what point these strips are going to intersect this, or cross those. And I think I want to put, no, I do want to put them there first and then have this cross, and then when it comes back on the next white, it'll cross there. Okay, that's what I'm going to do. Whatever you are calling out to me, I'm not understanding it. So, all right, I'm going to proceed from there. I shall be back. I think I may call this block Clown Car, with this being called Clown Stripe and all of this going on, sort of backed in. I think I might call it Clown Car. I am thinking that as I go further out, if I make this block larger, then I will make these correspondingly narrow. So I have cut these so that this will end up, no I haven't, but I will, so that this will end up a little narrower than the 1/2 inch that I used here. And then I think these will get wider as I go out. So those are my plans. I'm undecided about whether I think this is too much white in the center, if I should have shortened this a bit. That certainly is a possibility. I actually am liking this. I kind of like it. And it'll be interesting to see how it proceeds going out. And I'm not going to do that today on video because it will just be continuing what I've done. So I've just been making decisions as I go and auditioning things, and this is Clown Car. I will also note that my beloved Foff has been having discussions with me today. It is many years old, and bless its heart, it didn't used to care about holding the threads. It wouldn't nest underneath when I started a seam, but it has started doing that now. And I guess fair enough. I had a lot of years where I didn't have to worry so much about that. So now I'm starting to do feed in. Ordinarily it would be like a scrap piece you would feed in, and then when you finish sewing, before you sew the block through, when you finish sewing, then you put another piece through, cut that off, and then just keep running them back and forth. It's the scrap piece has been used for a long time. If you're interested in this concept, which is sewing scraps together as you go, like if you need to do half square triangles, and I have this whole tin of cutoffs from mostly doing foldbacks in patterns or quilts that I make. So I'm just using these as leaders and enders, which is what Bonnie Hunter calls it. So if you're interested in that concept, you kill 2 birds with 1 stone. I never like to kill birds though. You manage to do 2 projects at once, let's put it that way. And that's leaders and enders from Bonnie Hunter. That's kind of a narrow seam. I'm gonna have to rethink that one. And then I will, at some point, have all of these half square triangles already sewed and ready to go. So again, leaders and enders, Bonnie Hunter. And that is Clown Car, our wonky piece for today. As I said, I have some ideas for other things to do. Maybe not log cabin kinds of things, but we already have done several things with log cabins that we can continue to play with or riff off of. So I'll see what my mind kicks up by next Wednesday. On Sunday, I am going to talk about how I created the templates for a paper piecing for one of the quilts that I designed in the design challenge. It's the one with that was started out as windshield wipers in a car and ended up looking like villas on a hill. Seemed perfect to me for paper piecing. So I will be talking about how I created that paper piecing template. I hope I will see you on Sunday and Wednesday and whatever. Oh, and doing the miscellaneous things on Sunday. And I thought it should be miscellaneous Monday just for the alliteration. And I've decided that I'm going to call it Sundry Sunday, as in all and sundry or various and sundry. I probably won't be able to get it out correctly very often, but I'm going to call it Sundry Sunday. In the meantime, as always, be well, be happy, be quilting. Peace out.